In a silent courtroom in Washington, D.C., a 5-year-old girl sat beside her wounded German shepherd, clutching his paw as soldiers demanded his return. They called him government property. She called him family. The world would soon know him as something else entirely. The dog with a human heart. His name was Thor, a canine built for battle, discarded like broken machinery when the war ended. But love, as it turns out, isn't programmed. It's born. And when a child's innocence met a soldier's sorrow, a heartbeat connected them in a way science could never explain. This is not a tale about machines or law. It's a story about what happens when compassion defies command. When a dog teaches a courtroom, a country, and maybe all of us, what it really means to be alive. The rain had begun as a whisper, a soft drizzle that barely kissed the windshield. But by the time David Thompson turned onto Maple Avenue, it had become a steady, cold rhythm. Streetlights shimmered in puddles that stretched across the quiet road, and the small suburban town seemed to fold in on itself under the weight of the night. The wipers moved back and forth like a tired heartbeat. In the back seat, 5-year-old Mia watched the raindrops race each other down the glass, her reflection dim and thoughtful, lost somewhere between wakefulness and dream. David glanced at her through the rearview mirror. "Almost home, Peanut," he murmured. His voice was warm but edged with the fatigue of a man who had fought too many battles that day, in the courtroom, in his head, and within his heart. Beside him, Laura leaned her forehead against the cool window, the faint glow of her phone lighting her tired eyes. Then, out of the rhythm of the night, came a sound. A small, broken whimper. David's hands froze on the steering wheel. It was faint, almost lost beneath the rain, but unmistakable. A cry. An animal's cry. He frowned, slowing the car. "Did you hear that?" Laura lifted her head. "Hear what?" "There," he said, already lowering the window. The sound came again, sharp this time, desperate, somewhere behind the grocery store, where the alley met the dumpsters. Before he could react, a soft voice rose from the back seat. "Daddy, something's hurt." Mia was staring out into the darkness, eyes wide, her small hand pressed against the glass as if she could touch the sound itself. David hesitated. It was late. It was raining. But something about that cry, and the way Mia said it, made him pull the car over. He switched on the hazard lights and turned to his daughter. "Stay here, sweetheart. I'll check it out." But Mia was already unbuckling her seatbelt, her small shoes splashing on the wet pavement before Laura could stop her. "Mia!" Laura shouted, panic rising. "Get back here!" David was out the door in an instant, sprinting after her. The rain hit his face like cold needles. "Mia, wait!" The little girl didn't answer. She just followed the sound, that thin, trembling cry, down the narrow alley where trash cans had been tipped over, scattering soggy cardboard and plastic. The air smelled of wet asphalt and old fruit. Then she saw it. A shape curled against the wall, half hidden under a torn trash bag. "Daddy," she whispered. "It's a dog." David's breath caught. The creature was motionless, except for the faint rise and fall of its chest. Its fur, once likely a proud black and tan, was matted with mud and blood. The rain ran red where it hit his side. A metal tag hung from his neck, reflecting the faint light. Thor K937. David knelt down carefully, his lawyer's hands trembling. For once, not from pressure, but from compassion. "Easy there, buddy," he murmured. He reached out, but the dog growled weakly, a sound born of fear, not aggression. Mia stood beside him, her small pink raincoat flaring like a soft light in the gloom. She didn't flinch. Instead, she crouched down, so small, so fragile, and extended her tiny hand. "It's okay," she said, her voice trembling but steady. "Don't be scared." David wanted to stop her, to pull her back, but something in the air froze him. The dog's eyes, one brown, one faintly silver, locked onto the child's. The growl faded into a low, broken whine. "Laura, call the emergency vet," David shouted over his shoulder. He lifted the edge of the torn trash bag and froze. Beneath the matted fur, thin metal lines traced the dog's skin, not scars, but seams. Small sensors blinked faintly, their light flickering like a dying star. "What the hell?" he breathed. Laura's voice came from behind him, urgent, frightened. "David, what is that? Is it mechanical?" "I don't know," he said, shaking his head. "It's part of something. Look at these tags. Military issue." Mia didn't seem to hear them. She had already taken off her little pink jacket and draped it gently over the dog's shivering body. The rain darkened the fabric, but she didn't care. The German shepherd's breathing hitched, a faint rasp, then steadied. For a brief second, it looked at her as if recognizing something ancient and kind. "Don't be scared. You're safe now," Mia whispered again, her lips quivering. And in that fragile moment, between the storm and silence, the world seemed to hold its breath. David stared at the scene, his daughter kneeling in the rain beside a dying, half-machine dog, her small body shielding it from the cold. The image struck something deep inside him, something that all his years in law and logic could never explain. The rain washed over them, carrying away the dirt and blood that stained the pavement. Under the dim glow of the streetlight, it looked almost like baptism, the kind that doesn't cleanse sin, but sorrow. Then the dog moved, just slightly, enough for David to see the faint pulse in its neck, the slow blink of its eye. "He's alive," David said, half in disbelief. Laura knelt beside them, her hand over her mouth. "We can't just leave it here. David, look at him." "I know," David said. His tone had changed, softer, almost reverent. He slipped his arms beneath the heavy, limp body. The dog groaned, sensors flashing weakly in the dark. As David lifted him, a low hum came from the collar, a tiny screen lighting up for a moment with words that chilled him. "Property of U.S. Defense. Project Sentinel." "What does that mean?" Laura whispered. "I don't know," David said, glancing at his daughter. "But whatever it is, they threw him away." Mia reached out to stroke the dog's head. Her touch was gentle, fearless. "He's ours now," she said quietly. David's chest tightened. He didn't correct her. They hurried back to the car, the rain coming down harder now. As David laid the dog carefully across the back seat, Thor gave one weak exhale, a sigh of exhaustion, of surrender, of fragile trust. Mia climbed in beside him, her small hand resting over his paw as if to promise protection. David caught the image in the mirror, his little girl watching over the wounded creature, and felt something inside him shift. In that moment, he didn't see a broken animal. He saw a chance for redemption, not for the dog, but for himself. The wipers resumed their rhythm as he pulled away, headlights cutting through the rain. Behind them, the alley fell silent once more, except for the faint glimmer of blood mingling with water, washed clean by the storm. And somewhere, deep inside the shadows of the night, a signal blinked red, sending a message to someone who would soon come looking for what they'd lost. The rain kept falling, but inside the car, a small, broken heartbeat, and a little girl's unwavering love had just changed the course of everything. Rainwater still clung to Thor's fur as David carried him through the front door. The house, usually calm and filled with the faint scent of Laura's lavender candles, now smelled of iron and panic. The floor was a mess of muddy footprints and crimson streaks that trailed from the entryway to the kitchen. Laura rushed ahead, clearing the table, sweeping dishes and papers aside with trembling hands. "Lay him here," she said. David lowered the German Shepherd onto a blanket. The dog's body was heavier than he'd expected, muscles tight even in weakness. Thor's chest rose and fell unevenly, one breath shallow, the next strained. His metallic collar flickered dimly, small lights pulsing as if trapped between life and shutdown. Mia stood a few feet away, still in her rain-soaked jacket, her hair plastered to her cheeks. Her eyes never left the dog. David grabbed the first aid kit from the cabinet and tore it open. He pressed a towel from well to the largest wound near Thor's side. "He's losing too much blood." Laura's voice shook. "David, we should wait for the vet. What if he's—" "No time," he interrupted, his tone sharp but his hands careful. "If we wait, he won't make it." The towel darkened instantly. Thor flinched, a weak growl rattling in his throat. David spoke softly, almost like he would to a child. "Easy, buddy. We're not here to hurt you." He looked up at Laura. "Grab some warm water, clean towels, anything." Laura moved quickly, her fear turning into motion. Pots clanged, water ran. The house was alive with tension. Outside, thunder rolled, low and long, a sound that seemed to tremble through Thor's body. Mia crept closer, her small shoes squeaking on the tile. The dog's eyes fluttered open. For a second, his gaze found hers again. Something passed between them, a kind of silent recognition. David pressed harder against the wound. "Come on, stay with me." His breath was ragged now. "Don't you quit on me." Laura returned with warm towels and began cleaning the mud from Thor's fur. Beneath the dirt, strange patterns emerged. Faint metallic lines, like silver veins etched beneath the skin. She hesitated. "David, look at this." He followed her gaze and froze. The scars weren't natural. They ran in geometric precision along the dog's ribs and neck, where soft light glowed faintly beneath the skin. David felt a chill crawl down his spine. "What in God's name did they do to you?" he murmured. Thor's breathing faltered again. His body trembled violently, legs twitching as if reliving something, a nightmare, a battlefield, a command. Mia's small hand reached out. "It's okay," she whispered. "You're home now." The trembling slowed. David blinked. He couldn't explain it, but the dog's pulse, the faint rhythm under his hand, seemed to steady in response to her voice. "Laura," he said softly. "Look." Laura paused mid-motion. "What?" "His breathing," David said. "It's changing." They both turned to Mia. The child was kneeling beside the table, her hand on Thor's paw. Her eyes were closed, her lips moving silently, as if she were praying. A slow, synchronized pattern emerged. The rise of her small chest matching the fall of his. The tiny rhythm of her heartbeat faintly visible in her neck, pulsing in time with the light flicker under Thor's skin. David felt his throat tighten. "That's impossible," Laura whispered. "Maybe it's just coincidence." But deep down, neither believed that. Minutes passed in tense silence, broken only by the storm outside and the shallow, rhythmic sound of two beings breathing as one. Then, suddenly, Thor's body convulsed. His back legs kicked. His chest heaved. The towel in David's hand soaked red. Again. "Stay with me!" David pressed harder. "Damn it! Stay with me!" Laura grabbed another towel. "We're losing him!" And that's when it happened. A voice, soft, trembling, yet clear, cut through the chaos. "Daddy, please save him." The words hung in the air like lightning. David froze. The towel slipped from his hands. For a heartbeat, he couldn't breathe. Laura turned, eyes wide. "What did you just say?" Mia blinked, tears mixing with the rain still on her face. "Please, save him." The room went silent. David's knees nearly gave out. He looked at his daughter, the same little girl who hadn't spoken a single word since she was born, who had spent years in therapy, specialists, hospitals, hope and heartbreak. And now, out of nowhere, she had spoken for the first time, not for herself, but for a dying dog. Laura began to cry, the sound raw and disbelieving. She covered her mouth, whispering, "Oh God, David." She talked. David knelt, gripping the edge of the table to steady himself. His voice broke. "Mia, sweetheart, say it again." Mia shook her head. "Save him, Daddy." Her small voice cracked, and that was all it took. David's composure shattered. He pressed the towel again, hands shaking. Not from fear now, but from something far deeper. Hope. "I'm trying," he whispered. "I'm trying, baby." Thor's breathing eased, shallow but steady. The faint lights along his body dimmed, then flickered back on. David looked at his daughter again. "You did that," he said softly. "Somehow, you did that." Mia didn't answer. She just rested her cheek against the dog's paw. "He's tired," she murmured. "He wants to sleep." The house fell quiet again. Only the rain outside, and the slow hum of life returning where death had hovered. Laura brushed a strand of wet hair from Mia's face. "We'll let him sleep, honey. The vet will help him soon." But her voice wavered. When she looked at David, her eyes said what neither could admit aloud. What if it's too late? Then a sharp knock at the door broke the stillness. David turned. That must be Dr. Lawson. He exhaled, trying to calm his shaking hands. Finally. He opened the door to find the vet, a middle-aged man with a raincoat and medical bag, stepping into the foyer. His eyes widened the moment he saw the blood. "Good Lord, what happened here?" "Found him in a dumpster," David said quickly. "He's got wounds. Maybe shrapnel, maybe." The vet approached the table, pulling on gloves. "You did the right thing bringing him in." Then he stopped. The doctor's gaze locked on the metallic patterns along Thor's ribs, the faint mechanical hum beneath his skin. Slowly, he reached for the collar, turning it to the light. The screen blinked. "Project Sentinel, U.S. Defense Property, Unit Thor K937. The vet's face paled. He stepped back. "Mr. Thompson, this isn't just any dog." David frowned. "What do you mean?" The vet swallowed hard. "This one belongs to the military." Thunder cracked outside, loud, violent, final, as if the sky itself understood the gravity of that truth. David turned to Laura. Her face mirrored his fear. In the corner, Mia clutched Thor's paw, refusing to let go. The vet looked between them, voice low and uneasy. "Whatever you've brought into your home tonight, it isn't just wounded. It's wanted." And as another flash of lightning filled the kitchen with white light, David knew. Their lives had just changed forever. The soft hum of David Thompson's office computer filled the silence. Midnight light bled through the blinds, striping the dark room in bars of pale silver. Case files lay open across the desk, their pages wet from the drizzle that had followed him in. His suit jacket hung loosely on the back of his chair. He wasn't wearing the expression of a lawyer tonight, only of a father, desperate for answers. On the monitor, a sequence of numbers blinked from the military tag he had photographed earlier. K937. Project Sentinel. Each search brought him deeper into layers of encryption, firewalls, and redacted text. Most results were blanked out, labeled restricted access or unauthorized inquiry detected. He rubbed his eyes. Come on. There has to be something. On the kitchen table back home, Thor lay sleeping under the watch of Mia and Laura. The vet had done what he could, patching the wounds, setting up an IV drip. But he had left in a hurry, refusing to stay long, muttering about clearance levels and military property. The words had burned in David's mind all evening. Now, alone with the glow of the screen, he chased them like a man chasing ghosts. Finally, one link opened. A document with a faded government seal and the header, Department of Defense Experimental Division. Beneath it, a paragraph of fragmented text appeared, half corrupted, but legible enough. Project Sentinel, Advanced Integration Unit, Phase 3. Objective: merge biological instinct with autonomous artificial cognition. Subjects: K9 military operatives, prototype units, Thor 37, Odin 24, Valkyrie 09. David leaned back in his chair, staring at the words. His mind raced. Artificial cognition? Integration? He scrolled. Further, reading a note buried in the metadata. Thor 37 exhibited abnormal empathy response. Unit discontinued. Ordered for disposal. Disposal, he whispered. The word tasted bitter. That was why the dog had been thrown away. Not because it was broken, but because it had felt. He ran a hand through his hair, heart pounding. He'd spent his whole career believing the law protected the innocent. But this was beyond law. His phone buzzed, startling him. The number was unknown. Mr. Thompson? The voice on the other end was low, precise, like someone trained to never reveal emotion. This is Colonel Marcus Hale. We need to speak, now. David frowned. Who is this? How did you get this number? I think you know, Mr. Thompson. It's about the asset you retrieved tonight. The word asset made David's stomach twist. You mean the dog? A pause. That animal is property of the United States government. It is a classified prototype that should never have been in civilian hands. David stood from his chair, pacing. Classified or not, that prototype was bleeding out in a trash bin. My daughter found him dying. Hale's tone sharpened. Your daughter shouldn't have been anywhere near it. You have no idea what that thing is capable of. Thing? David repeated, anger rising. He's not a thing. He's a living creature. He looked at my little girl and calmed down like he knew her. That's not programming. That's emotion. That's an anomaly, Hale replied coldly. A malfunction. The unit was designed for battlefield analytics, not affection. David stopped pacing. Then maybe your system's malfunction was the best thing it ever did. Silence. Then the colonel spoke again, slower this time, almost a warning. You're an attorney, Mr. Thompson. You understand the implications of harboring government property. We're willing to retrieve it quietly, tonight. No press, no legal mess. You hand over the dog, and we forget this conversation ever happened. David looked out through the blinds. A black SUV sat idling across the street, unmarked, engine humming. Two silhouettes inside, watching. His chest tightened. "You're already outside my house, aren't you?" "We're simply ensuring the safety of national assets," Hale said smoothly. "You have 1 hour to comply." David clenched his jaw. "And if I don't? Then I can't guarantee what happens next." The line went dead. For a long moment, David stood motionless. Then he reached for the small photograph on his desk. Mia, at age 3, smiling beside their old golden retriever, before she'd lost her voice. He stared at it, the weight of 1,000 courtroom victories suddenly meaningless. He whispered to the empty room. The law was supposed to protect the innocent, but what if the law's the one doing the hurting? He sat back down, breathing hard. The screens in front of him reflected his face, half-lit, half-shadowed, a man caught between morality and power. He began typing again, pulling up federal statutes, animal welfare codes, and property laws. None of it mattered. Every legal avenue hit the same wall. Government immunity. The law, his old weapon, was useless here. Behind him, a faint creak came from the office door. David turned, startled. A tall figure in a long coat stepped inside, water dripping from his hat. His badge caught the light. Colonel Marcus Hale, U.S. Defense Operations. "I prefer to handle things in person," Hale said calmly, closing the door. David's pulse quickened. "You break into people's offices often, Colonel?" "Only when time is critical." Hale's gaze was cold, calculated. "Where's the dog?" "At home," David replied evenly. "Sleeping, healing, the way any living being should be after nearly dying." "Then you know what it is," Hale said. "I know what your documents say," David countered. "And I know what I saw. Fear, pain, trust. That's not machine behavior." "Empathy is not emotion," Hale snapped. "It's programming, adaptive response designed to build trust with soldiers. You've seen the effect firsthand. The unit latched onto your daughter because she offered it protection. It's code, not connection." David stepped forward. "You can dress it up however you want, Colonel. But when my daughter touched that dog, it stopped fighting. You call it programming. I call it a soul." For the first time, Hale's mask faltered, a flicker, almost pity, crossed his face. Then it was gone. "You're making a mistake," he said. "No," David said quietly. "I made mistakes for years defending people who didn't deserve it. This time, I'm standing on the right side." Hale exhaled slowly. "You don't understand what you're getting into." He pulled a card from his coat and set it on the desk. "You have until morning. After that, the order becomes official. You won't be able to stop it." David looked down at the card, the government seal gleaming under the desk lamp. When he looked up again, Hale was gone. The office door hung open, rain whispering against the hallway tiles. David stared at the darkness outside. For the first time in his life, he realized that truth wasn't found in legal documents or government seals. It was lying on his kitchen floor, breathing softly beside a little girl who'd spoken her first words for the sake of something everyone else had already given up on. He turned off the monitor. The last line on the screen glowed for a heartbeat before vanishing. Project Sentinel status terminated, but in David's heart, something had just begun. Morning light drifted through the curtains of Mia's room, soft and golden, carrying the smell of fresh rain and soap. The storm had passed, leaving behind that fragile quiet that only comes after chaos, when everything broken dares to rest. On the carpet near her bed, The German shepherd lay curled in a nest of blankets, chest rising in slow, even breaths. The faint hum of his sensors had quieted overnight, the blinking red replaced by a steady blue pulse, calm, alive, at peace. Mia was awake before anyone else. She sat cross-legged beside him, wearing her favorite sky blue pajamas, a book open across her knees. Her voice, still delicate, uncertain, trembled as she sounded out each word from Goodnight Moon. Good night, stars. Good night, air. Thor's ears twitched. One paw moved slightly. He exhaled through his nose, a soft sound almost like a sigh. Mia smiled. Good night. Everything, everywhere. She closed the book and looked at him. See? That's how it ends. It wasn't the confident chatter of most 5-year-olds. Her voice broke here and there, some syllables shy. But to David and Laura, who watched from the hallway, it was nothing short of a miracle. She's talking again, Laura whispered, tears welling. She's really talking. David nodded, his throat too tight to answer. For years, he'd spent sleepless nights reading studies, hiring therapists, flying across states in search of hope. And it had come not through medicine, but through a wounded dog lying in their daughter's room. He watched as Thor lifted his head weakly. The movement was small, but it made Mia giggle, that bright, unrestrained laugh that filled the room like sunlight. David turned to his wife. You hear that? She's laughing. Laura covered her mouth, trying not to cry again. Oh my God, I haven't heard that sound in 2 years. Inside, Mia gently patted Thor's paw. Daddy says you need rest, she whispered. But I think you're brave. I think you're the best dog ever. Thor's tail gave one slow wag, deliberate, steady, as though every ounce of strength in him was poured into that single motion. Mia gasped. You understood me! She clapped her hands, then quickly shushed herself. Sorry. You're still tired. David stepped into the room. He's getting better, he said softly. He just needs time. Mia looked up at him. Can we keep him, Daddy? Her words were like glass, fragile, pure, dangerous to hold. David hesitated. He glanced at the metallic seams still visible along Thor's ribs. We'll see, sweetheart. Right now, he needs us. That's all that matters. Thor blinked, his gaze shifting between father and daughter. For a brief moment, David could have sworn he saw understanding there. Not the reactive obedience of a trained animal, but comprehension. Days passed, slow and tender. The house adjusted to a new rhythm. The once quiet living room now echoed with Mia's giggles as she made up stories for Thor, weaving him into fairy tales about knights and castles. Laura would peek in from the kitchen, heart swelling each time she saw her daughter lying beside the dog, whispering secrets into his ear, as though he were her closest friend. At night, Thor would rest at the foot of her bed, eyes half open, sensors faintly glowing in the dark. The storm in him, whatever it was that had been built, programmed, or burned, seemed to soften under the warmth of that little girl's world. One afternoon, Mia sat on the floor with crayons scattered around her. Thor's head rested near her knee. She worked with the concentration of a tiny artist, her tongue peeking from the corner of her mouth. When David entered, she lifted the paper proudly. Look, Daddy! It was a fiesta drawing, uneven lines and bright colors. In it, 4 figures stood under a large yellow sun, a man, a woman, a little girl, and a big brown dog with a wagging tail. Above them, she had written in careful block letters, My family. David crouched down beside her. "That's beautiful, honey." His voice cracked slightly as he said it. "That's us?" Mia nodded. "That's you and Mommy. And that's me and Thor. He's part of us now." Thor gave a soft, approving huff, his tail brushing the floor. David swallowed hard. "Yeah, sweetheart. I think he is." Later that night, after Mia had fallen asleep, David sat in the doorway, watching them. Thor lay close to her, his massive frame curved protectively around the small girl. Her tiny hand rested on his collar, and the light beneath his skin pulsed in rhythm with her breathing, a quiet, almost invisible dance of life and code. Laura came up behind him, placing a hand on his shoulder. "You know this can't last forever," she said gently. "I know. They'll come for him. I know that too." She leaned closer. "Then what are we going to do?" David stared into the soft glow coming from the collar, the pulse that seemed to beat in time with his daughter's heart. "We fight," he said quietly. "If I've ever fought for anything real in my life, it's this." Down the hall, the phone buzzed on his desk. David rose slowly, dread curling in his stomach. He already knew who it would be. He picked it up, and there it was, the official email. The subject line in bold, cold type. Federal Order, Immediate Retrieval of Government Property, Project Sentinel Unit K937. The seal of the Department of Defense glared from the top of the page. Beneath it, Colonel Marcus Hale's signature. David read the final line twice. "Compliance required within 48 hours. Failure to surrender unit will result in legal action under federal jurisdiction." He closed the laptop slowly. In the silence, he could still hear Mia's soft breathing from the bedroom, and the faint, loyal sound of Thor's tail brushing the sheets, even in sleep. Laura looked at him from across the room. "What is it?" He didn't answer right away. Instead, he walked to Mia's door, watching his daughter curl up beside the creature that had given her voice, her laughter, her light. Finally, he turned to his wife. His voice was calm, steady, the kind of calm that only comes before a storm. "They just made this official," he said. "The government wants our dog back." Laura's hand flew to her mouth. "Oh, God." David's eyes didn't move from the scene before him, his daughter and her guardian. "They can call him a machine all they want," he whispered. "But I've seen his soul." In the dark, the soft pulse of blue from Thor's collar brightened, as if he somehow understood what was coming. And outside, across the quiet neighborhood, a black SUV rolled to a stop under the streetlight. Two men in suits stepped out, folders in hand. The war for one broken dog, and the little girl who loved him, had just begun. The marble halls of the federal courthouse in Washington, D.C., had never felt so cold. The walls, adorned with flags and portraits of old judges, seemed to echo the footsteps of soldiers in polished boots as they escorted the Thompsons through the corridor. Every sound carried: the rustle of papers, the clicking of cameras, the distant hum of reporters whispering outside the courtroom doors. David walked beside his wife, his hand steadying Mia's shoulder. The little girl clutched Thor's leash, her knuckles pale, her pink jacket hanging loosely on her small frame. The German shepherd walked beside her, tail low, eyes cautious. Though his wounds had healed, there was something haunted in his gaze, as if he knew where he was being taken. Laura leaned close to David. "Are we doing the right thing?" she whispered. David's jaw tightened. "It's the only thing left. If we don't fight now, we lose him forever." The courtroom doors opened with a heavy groan. Inside, the air was thick. Journalists packed the benches, murmuring as the family entered. Rows of military officials in dark uniforms sat on the opposite side, their faces carved from stone. Cameras flashed like lightning as Thor stepped into view. A murmur rippled through the crowd. "That's the AI unit?" someone whispered. "He looks normal." David led Mia to the table. Thor sat obediently at her feet, his head resting gently on her lap. She stroked his fur, whispering something only he could hear. At the far end of the room, Judge Carolyn Myers, a stern woman in her 60s, adjusted her glasses. "Court is now in session," she said, her voice echoing. "The United States government versus David and Laura Thompson, in the matter of recovery of classified property, designated Project Sentinel Unit K937, codename Thor." Every word struck like a hammer. Property, unit, codename. David rose from his seat. "Your Honor," he began, "before we start, I'd like to remind this court that what stands beside my daughter isn't a weapon. He's a living being who saved her life and gave her back her voice." Across the aisle, Colonel Marcus Hale stood. His posture was military perfect. His face, unreadable. "Objection, Your Honor. The defense's emotional appeal is irrelevant. We are discussing government property, not a living being." David turned sharply. "You're wrong, Colonel. He breathes. He bleeds. He fears. He feels. If that's not alive, then what is?" "Programming," Hale replied coolly. "A machine simulating empathy. The moment you attach morality to metal, you lose sight of the law." The judge raised a hand. "Enough. Let's proceed with evidence." Hale nodded to an assistant, who wheeled in a monitor. The lights dimmed. "Your Honor," Hale said, "to demonstrate the nature of this unit, I will present field footage from Operation Sand Veil." The screen flickered to life. Desert heat filled the frame, soldiers running through smoke and chaos, bullets tearing the air. Among them, Thor charged forward, outfitted in tactical gear, sensors glowing red. His speed was terrifying, his precision inhuman. He tackled an armed insurgent, disarmed him, and then, on command, fired a mounted tranquilizer round from a device on his harness. Hale's voice narrated, "Unit K937, designed for multi-environmental combat, infiltration, and rescue. Programmed to execute orders without hesitation." The next clip showed Thor dragging a wounded soldier to safety. Another, leaping between explosions, obeying coded voice commands. Then, the final clip. Thor was shot. The sound echoed through the courtroom. Mia gasped. On screen, Thor fell but didn't retreat. He limped forward, still defending his squad until reinforcements arrived. Then came the command, "Unit, disengage." The lights on his collar went dark. Soldiers left him behind. In the silence that followed, you could hear the faint hum of the monitor. Thor shifted on the courtroom floor, his ears pressed flat, his body lowering. A low, mournful sound escaped him. Not a growl, not pain, but memory. Mia leaned forward, wrapping her arms around his neck. "It's okay," she whispered. "You don't have to watch." David felt something inside him crack. He looked up at the judge. "That's what you call property? A machine that risked its life to save yours?" Hale adjusted his jacket. "He followed code, Mr. Thompson. Nothing more. The footage proves it. His responses are automated, not emotional. There's no moral awareness, no conscience." "Then why does he look ashamed right now?" David shot back. Hale hesitated, eyes flicking toward Thor, who still cowered beside the child. For a brief second, the colonel's expression softened, almost human, but it vanished as quickly as it appeared. Sympathetic interpretation, he said. You're projecting human traits onto a machine. David stepped forward, voice rising. No, Colonel. You're stripping human traits away from him to justify your mistake. The room buzzed with murmurs. Reporters scribbled furiously. The judge banged her gavel, so, "Order! I'll have order in this court." Then, a small voice broke the silence. "He's not bad," Mia said softly. All eyes turned to her. "He saved people. He saved me." Her small hand clutched Thor's collar. "If he's just a machine, then why did he cry when the doctor hurt him? Why does he come when I'm scared?" The judge looked down, visibly moved. David crouched beside his daughter. "You see, Your Honor," he said quietly. "This isn't a question of ownership. It's a question of what makes something alive. Memory, emotion, loyalty. Because if those things don't count, then none of us do." The judge exhaled slowly. "Mr. Thompson, you understand the gravity of what you're challenging." "Yes," David said, "but I also understand what's right." She looked at Hale. "Colonel, the footage is disturbing. The creature's behavior does suggest awareness." Hale's tone hardened. "Your Honor, the unit contains classified data that poses a national threat. This is not about compassion, it's about control. If sensitive information is compromised," David interrupted, voice steady but full of steel, "you lost control the moment you built something capable of love." The room erupted in murmurs again. The judge called for recess. Cameras flashed. Reporters shouted questions. David leaned down to Mia. "You okay, sweetheart?" She nodded, hugging Thor tightly. "He doesn't like the loud noises." Thor rested his head in her lap, eyes closed, breathing slow and heavy, a soldier trapped between two worlds, one of command, one of love. As the bailiff escorted everyone out, Hale remained at the table, watching them. For the first time, a trace of doubt shadowed his face. He looked at the dog, at the small girl holding on to him, and his jaw clenched. Outside, storm clouds gathered above DC again, gray and heavy. The world had just witnessed something it couldn't unsee. A machine that cried, a child that spoke for it, and a father who dared to stand against the law he once served. And somewhere in that thunder, the first true battle for Thor's soul had begun. The second day of the trial dawned under a gray, trembling sky. Reporters flooded the courthouse steps, their cameras flashing like a storm of artificial lightning. Headlines had already begun to circle the country. Lawyer fights U.S. government to save K9 AI dog. The story had found its pulse, and that pulse was about to change everything. Inside, the courtroom felt heavier than before, the kind of tension that makes even breathing sound loud. The air carried the smell of polished wood and coffee gone cold. Soldiers in uniform lined the back wall. Across from them sat David, Laura, and Mia. Thor rested at their feet, head on his paws, his gaze fixed on the girl beside him. Judge Myers adjusted her glasses. "We will resume proceedings. Mr. Thompson, your cross-examination of the government's technical advisor may continue." David stood, buttoning his jacket. He didn't look at the witnesses, or at Colonel Hale, who sat like a statue behind his team. His eyes went to the little girl in the front row, his anchor. "Dr. Pierce," David began, turning to the witness stand, "you testified that Thor, Project Sentinel Unit K937, lacks self-awareness, correct?" The scientist nodded stiffly. "That is correct. The AI is designed for emotional imitation, not genuine empathy." David paced slowly, his tone calm but cutting. And yet, this so-called imitation saved human lives in the field, responded to pain, and even resisted termination orders. How do you explain that? Dr. Pierce hesitated. Adaptive programming. The system learns emotional triggers to increase mission efficiency. So, David said, if a machine learns to care, to protect, to sacrifice, does it matter whether it's called programming or soul? Objection from the government's side. Sustained. The judge warned him to stick to facts. David smiled faintly. Facts, yes. He turned toward Thor, who now sat upright, alert, but calm. Let's talk about one fact then, he said. Thor's response to my daughter. Murmurs rippled through the courtroom. David gestured to Mia. Your Honor, with your permission, I'd like to demonstrate something. The judge hesitated. You may proceed cautiously. David nodded. Mia, sweetheart, can you come up here? The little girl rose, her pink jacket slightly too big, her shoes squeaking softly on the polished floor. Thor followed instinctively, his steps slow and deliberate. When they reached the witness stand, he sat beside her without a command. The room went utterly silent. Even the ceiling fans seemed to hold their breath. Mia, David said gently, can you touch his collar like you do at home? She nodded. Her small fingers reached for the metal device around Thor's neck, the one still faintly scarred from battle. The lights on it flickered. Suddenly, the monitor the government had connected to Thor's sensors, meant to track his neural response during the hearing, beeped softly. A digital pulse appeared on the screen. At first, it was erratic, random spikes, chaotic lines of data. Then Mia's hand rested fully on his fur. The beeping slowed. The data lines began to align. The courtroom watched in stunned silence as the screen showed two rhythmic waves, one from Thor's biocore, the other from the small medical wristband Mia wore due to her past neurological condition. And then, impossibly, the two heartbeats synchronized. One pattern, one rhythm. The doctor at the monitor frowned. That's not possible. A murmur swept through the room, whispers turning into gasps. The journalists leaned forward, pens frozen mid-air. Even the soldiers shifted uneasily. On the screen, the lights pulsed in unison, a soft, glowing rhythm that seemed almost alive. Mia smiled faintly. He's okay, she whispered. Laura pressed a hand to her mouth, tears spilling down her cheeks. He's alive because of her, she said, voice trembling. He's breathing her heartbeat. The judge's gavel tapped once, but even she didn't speak. Her eyes were wide, reflecting the faint blue light flickering from the monitor. Thor let out a low, soft whine, leaning closer to the girl. His tail thumped once against the floor. Not a trick, not a command, but a simple response. Connection. David looked at Colonel Hale. Still calling that a malfunction? Hale said nothing. His face was pale, eyes locked on the screen. For the first time, the stoic officer seemed unsure. His hands, usually so steady, tightened against the table. David's voice dropped lower. Colonel, you said this dog doesn't feel, that he's property, but that right there, that's not code. That's life. You can't patent that. Hale's jaw clenched. You don't understand what this means. If the AI is integrating with human biometrics, it's unpredictable, dangerous. Or miraculous, David countered, depending on what you choose to see. The judge leaned back slowly, her tone quieter now. Mr. Thompson, this revelation changes things, but it also raises questions. What exactly are we witnessing? Dr. Pierce stammered. I don't know, Your Honor. The synchronization should be temporary. There's no physiological basis for shared rhythm between a biological and artificial heart rate. David stepped closer to the bench. Maybe there's no basis because we've never allowed ourselves to look for one. The courtroom fell into silence again. Mia, unaware of the storm around her, hugged Thor's neck. The screen continued its steady, mesmerizing rhythm, the pulse of something no one had words for yet. Finally, the judge spoke softly. We will adjourn for the day. The court requires time to review this new evidence. Her voice trembled slightly, a sign that the impossible had touched even her reason. Reporters exploded into motion as soon as the gavel struck. Cameras flashed, questions fired, chaos erupted. David gathered Mia into his arms while Laura bent to steady Thor, who now seemed more exhausted than ever. Colonel Hale remained seated, staring blankly at the monitor even after it had gone dark. His reflection lingered in the glass. A man built from orders and duty, now watching the one thing his system had never taught him to understand: compassion. As the family made their way out through the courthouse doors, the world was already changing outside. Screens across the nation replayed the footage, anchors speaking in hushed awe. By the time they reached the courthouse steps, reporters were shouting over one another, microphones extended. A woman's voice cut through the noise, trembling with excitement. Mr. Thompson, people are calling him the dog with a human heart. Is that true? David shielded Mia from the flashes, holding her close. Thor pressed against his leg, calm despite the chaos. He looked up at the sea of faces, the cameras, the shouting, the rain beginning again, softer this time, like the world itself exhaling. His answer was quiet, but carried through the noise. If having a heart means being capable of love, then yes, he has one. The cameras erupted. The phrase would circle the globe before nightfall, and somewhere inside the courthouse, Colonel Hale stood alone before the empty monitor, staring at the ghost of that shared pulse still flickering faintly in his mind. For the first time, he wasn't sure which side he was on. The Thompson home was silent, except for the hum of the refrigerator and the soft, rhythmic sound of rain tapping against the kitchen window. Midnight had come and gone, but no one was sleeping. The house felt heavy, not just from exhaustion, but from the weight of everything hanging over them. Stacks of letters and legal documents littered the dining table. Some were stamped confidential. Others bore the sharp insignia of the Department of Defense. Every envelope carried the same cold demand: cease litigation and surrender Project Sentinel Unit K-937 immediately. David sat at the table, shoulders slumped, his tie loose, his eyes hollow. The glow from his laptop screen reflected off the dark circles beneath them. He'd been rereading the same line in an email for nearly an hour. Subject: Notice of Investigation, State Bar Ethics Committee. Mr. Thompson, your continued involvement in classified litigation may constitute grounds for disciplinary action and disbarment. His stomach twisted. It wasn't just the case anymore. It was his career, his name, his entire life's work. Laura walked in quietly, a blanket wrapped around her shoulders. Her face was pale, her voice barely a whisper. You should sleep. David didn't look up. Can't. She glanced at the screen, then at the papers scattered before him. Another threat? He gave a humorless laugh. They don't even bother hiding it anymore. Step away, or we'll take everything. Their words, not mine. Laura sat across from him. David, maybe they're right. Maybe we can't win this. He looked at her, eyes red, tired, but burning with something stubborn. If we quit now, what do I tell Mia? That the world is too cruel to fight for what's right? That a piece of paper has more value than a life? Don't twist this, she said, her voice cracking. I want to protect her too. But what happens if they take your license? If they disbar you? How do we even survive? He sighed, rubbing his temples. I've spent my entire life fighting for other people's justice. Now that it's my own family's, they want me to surrender. The rain outside grew heavier, a soft roar against the windows. Laura's eyes glistened. You're not just risking your career. You're risking everything. Our safety, her future. These people don't play fair, David. They can destroy us. He looked away, jaw tightening. Then let them try. Don't do that, she whispered. Don't become reckless just because you're scared. David slammed his hand on the table, the sound sharp enough to make her flinch. He immediately regretted it. His voice softened. I'm sorry, I don't know how to stop fighting. It's all I know. Laura stood, pacing near the window. The reflection of the rain danced across her face like shadows. She's 5 years old, David. She doesn't need a lawyer. She needs her father. He didn't answer. Instead, he stared past her into the hallway, where the faint crack of light spilled from Mia's bedroom. He rose slowly. Come with me. Laura followed as he walked down the hall, each step soft on the wooden floor. He pushed open the door. Inside, Mia slept peacefully, her breathing slow and even. Thor lay curled beside her bed, his head resting near her arm, one paw draped gently over her small wrist. The collar light pulsed faintly, that same rhythmic glow that once stunned the world in court. David stood in the doorway, watching them. For a moment, everything, the threats, the fear, the noise, vanished. All he could see was this: innocence and loyalty, side by side. He spoke quietly, as if afraid to break the spell. You know, I've won every battle in my life, he said, his voice trembling. Every case, every argument, every verdict. But this one, he swallowed hard. This one's not about winning. It's about her soul. Laura's tears slipped silently down her cheeks. She reached for his hand, gripping it tightly. Then we have to make sure she doesn't lose it, no matter what happens. He nodded slowly, staring at his daughter. The little girl who'd been silent her whole life until a wounded dog gave her voice back. She talked because of him, he murmured. She laughed because of him. How do I explain to her that the same system that taught me justice is trying to take that away? Laura looked at him through her tears. Then don't explain it. Show her what justice really means. He turned to her, eyes wet but fierce again. You're saying we go public? She hesitated, then nodded. If they're threatening you behind closed doors, bring it into the light. Make them fight where everyone can see. David let out a shaky breath, the decision forming in him like the tightening of a bowstring. You know what that means. They'll come after us harder. I know, she whispered. But you've already lost sleep, safety, peace. The only thing left to lose is fear. He looked back at Mia and Thor. The faint sound of the dog's slow breathing filled the room, steady, reassuring. David crouched beside them, running his fingers through Thor's fur. The German shepherd opened one eye, meeting his gaze. There was something in that look. Not just trust, but defiance. David smiled faintly. You've already fought your war, haven't you, boy? Guess it's my turn now. Thor let out a quiet huff, as if in agreement. Back in the kitchen, David powered on his laptop again. His fingers hovered over the keyboard for a long moment before typing a new email. Not to a lawyer, not to the court, but to a journalist who had been trying to reach him for days. Subject: You want the truth? Body: Come tomorrow morning. You'll have it. He hit send. Laura stood in the doorway, her arms crossed, half frightened, half proud. What did you just do? David leaned back in his chair, eyes tired but alive. I just opened the door they've been trying to keep shut. The rain outside softened into a drizzle. In Mia's room, the steady rhythm of Thor's collar pulsed once, twice, a heartbeat echoing through the quiet house. For the first time in weeks, David felt calm. The fear hadn't left him. It had simply become fuel. He looked out the window, where the streetlight glowed dim through the mist. Tomorrow, he said softly, they'll hear our side of the story. And as dawn began to crawl over the horizon, the war between truth and power, between a father's love and the system that sought to break it, was no longer silent. It was about to roar. The storm came without warning, a wall of wind and water slamming against the Thompson home like an uninvited force of nature. The rain fell in sheets, hammering the roof, flooding the gutters, and drowning the night in restless noise. Inside, the lights flickered. Mia stirred in her sleep, her small hand still resting on Thor's back. The German shepherd lifted his head, ears pricking at something only he could hear. A low growl rumbled in his chest, not from pain, but from instinct. David was in his office, reviewing a draft statement for the press. He had promised himself he'd go public in the morning. But the universe, it seemed, had other plans. Thunder rolled. Then, a sound beneath it. A click. A metallic slide. David froze. That wasn't the storm. That was a lock being forced. He pushed away from the desk and stepped into the hallway. Laura, he called softly. From the kitchen came her answer, half whisper, half fear. Did you hear that? Before he could reply, the power went out. The house plunged into darkness. Only Thor's collar glowed faintly from Mia's room, a dim blue heartbeat in the black. Then, a crash, glass shattering. David! He ran toward the sound, bare feet sliding on the tile. Two figures in dark tactical gear burst through the back door, silent, precise, moving like shadows trained to erase their own footsteps. One of them raised a hand. Federal order, step aside. The unit is to be retrieved immediately. David's pulse thundered in his ears. You can't come in here. This is private property. The agent didn't flinch. You've been warned. You're harboring classified military intelligence. Laura appeared behind him, clutching Mia's blanket. Please, our daughter's asleep. Don't do this. Where's the unit? The second agent barked. David's voice broke through the storm. He's not a unit. He's family. In that instant, a deep, guttural snarl echoed from the hallway. Thor appeared. Fur bristling, teeth bared, body angled between the intruders and the small figure now visible behind him. Mia, clutching her stuffed toy, wide-eyed and trembling. Daddy? The sound of her voice was enough. Thor lunged. Chaos erupted. The first agent fired a taser. The darts struck Thor's shoulder, crackling electricity across his body. But instead of falling, he powered through it, slamming into the man's chest, sending him sprawling into the counter. The other agent swung a baton, but Thor twisted, teeth sinking into his arm. Thor, no! David shouted. But it was too late. Adrenaline had taken over. Mia screamed, covering her ears. David grabbed a lamp, smashing it across the second agent's shoulder. Laura pulled Mia into her arms, shielding her. The storm outside roared louder, Wind howling through the broken window, rain splattering across the kitchen floor. One of the agents recovered his weapon, this time a sidearm. "Get the girl away from it!" he shouted. David saw the glint of the gun, saw where it was aimed, straight at Mia. Something primal erupted inside him. "You'll have to go through me first," he roared, stepping in front of his daughter. But he wasn't the first to move. Thor leapt. The gun fired. The sound split the storm in two. A deafening crack. A flash. Then, silence. Thor hit the floor, his body twisting mid-air before crashing into the table. Shards of glass and paper rained down. The shot meant for Mia had struck his side. Deep, final. "No!" David lunged forward. "No, no, no!" Mia broke free from Laura's grip, running to him. "Thor!" The dog tried to lift his head. His eyes flickered. Blue, then amber, then blue again. The light in his collar pulsed erratically, slower each time. David pressed his hands against the wound. "Stay with us, buddy. You hear me? Stay with us." Thor's chest heaved. He looked toward the girl, the only face he seemed to recognize in all the noise. Mia knelt beside him, tears falling onto his fur. "It's okay," she whispered. "You saved me. You're safe now." He let out a soft, trembling whine, a sound so fragile it broke the room apart. His paw lifted slightly, brushing against her small arm before falling limp again. Mia pressed her hand against his chest, the way she had in the courtroom, desperate, shaking. "Please," she whispered. "Please wake up." And then it happened again. The faint rhythm. Her tiny heartbeat, fluttering beneath her palm, synced with the fading light beneath his collar. Once. Twice. David froze, watching in disbelief as the two pulses, one human, one artificial, began to align. Beep, beep, beep. The monitor light flashed in perfect unison with her pulse. Laura sobbed openly now, collapsing to her knees beside them. "David, oh God." He held Mia close, but the child refused to let go of Thor. "He's not gone," she whispered. "He's still here." Thor blinked once, slow, deliberate, his gaze fixed on her face. Then the light dimmed. The last heartbeat on the collar flickered faintly, then vanished. Mia's hand stayed pressed against him. Her small shoulders shook with silent cries. "You said you wouldn't leave," she whispered. "You promised." David couldn't speak. He pulled his daughter into his arms, holding her against his chest, his own tears lost in her hair. The agents stood frozen. One lowered his weapon, guilt and shock written across his face. The other turned away, voice tight. We didn't mean—" "Get out!" David hissed, his voice trembling with fury. "Get out of my house!" They hesitated, then retreated into the rain, disappearing into the night as quickly as they had come. For a long time, the only sound was the storm. David knelt beside the fallen dog, stroking his fur. "You saved her," he whispered. "You did what no man in this room had the courage to do." Laura touched his shoulder. "David, what do we do now?" He looked up, eyes burning. "We tell the world." And they did. By dawn, the story had exploded across every major news outlet. Breaking news: government raid ends in K9. Hero's death. AI dog shot protecting child. Questions of consciousness ignite global outrage. Footage from neighbors' doorbell cameras, the raid, the gunshot, the aftermath, flooded the internet. Millions watched in horror. Across the world, the image of Mia kneeling beside Thor's body became a symbol, a child's innocence versus the machinery of power. Protests erupted. Hashtags trended. "Ah, justice." for Thor lit up every screen. But inside the Thompson home there were no cameras, no speeches, only silence. Mia sat on the floor, wrapped in a blanket, staring at the still shape of her best friend. Her lips moved silently, whispering to him. David didn't need to hear the words. He already knew them. Goodbye. Outside, the storm had passed. But inside that small house, it had just begun. The courtroom was silent. The same marble walls that had once echoed with the weight of military commands and political arrogance now felt like a cathedral of grief. Cameras were forbidden this time, but every seat was taken. Reporters scribbling furiously, soldiers standing stiff and uncomfortable, citizens who had lined up since dawn to witness what the world was already calling the trial of humanity. Mia sat in her wheelchair beside her father, clutching the folded pink jacket she'd once used to cover Thor's bleeding body. Her hair was neatly braided, but her eyes, too old for 5 years, were distant, fixed on the still form lying beside her. Thor's body rested in a simple casket at the front of the courtroom, draped not in a flag, but in a white cloth embroidered with his name, Thor K937. The faint imprint of his tag gleamed against the light. To anyone else, he might still look like a machine, but to those who had watched the footage, who had seen him leap between a child and a bullet, he was something far greater. David sat with his hands clasped, the tension in his shoulders visible beneath his black suit. Laura sat behind them, her hand on his back, not as reassurance but as reminder. He was not alone in this fight. Judge Myers entered. The murmurs quieted instantly. "Court is now in session," she said softly, her tone gentler than before. "We are reconvened for the final statements in the matter of United States versus Thompson." Colonel Hale sat on the government's side again, but his demeanor had changed. The arrogance was gone, replaced by weariness, or perhaps regret. His eyes, once sharp with authority, now looked at the casket more than the opposing counsel. The judge nodded toward David. "Mr. Thompson, you may proceed." David stood slowly, buttoning his coat with trembling fingers. He took a breath and walked to the center of the courtroom. The floor creaked faintly beneath his shoes for a long moment. He didn't speak. He just looked around, at the walls, the flags, the people. "When I first walked into this courtroom," he began, his voice low but steady, "I was a lawyer defending a case. But now I stand here as a father, and as a man who has witnessed something this country seems to have forgotten: the difference between intelligence and conscience." The room was still. He turned toward the casket. That dog, that soldier, whatever name or number they give him, didn't follow code when he jumped in front of a gun. He didn't obey programming when he protected my daughter. He made a choice, and that choice cost him his life. His voice broke slightly, but he didn't stop. We've built machines to kill. We've built laws to justify it. But this, he pointed toward Thor's still form, this was something else. This was love. Not the kind you can design or command, the kind that defies reason, the kind that asks for nothing in return. He stepped closer to the bench. If love isn't enough reason to protect a life, then what kind of country are we? A hush fell over the room, heavy, sacred. Even the sound of the rain outside seemed to pause. David's eyes glistened as he continued, quieter now. "For years, I believed justice was about winning, about laws and loopholes. But justice without humanity is just paperwork. My daughter, 5 years old, found her voice because of this dog. He gave her something no doctor, No medicine, no miracle ever could. And now the law wants to strip that away because it can't understand it. He looked directly at Colonel Hale. Maybe it's time we stop trying to understand everything and start feeling something instead. Hale's eyes dropped to the table. David turned back to the judge. Your Honor, I'm not asking for the impossible. I'm asking for the right to bury our friend, to honor him, not as a machine, but as what he truly was, a soul. He may have been built by human hands, but he became something no hand could create. He took a step back, his voice trembling now, raw and human. You can call him property, you can call him code, but when my daughter touched his heart, it beat with hers. You can't legislate that. You can only respect it. He paused, exhaling. If this court decides that love isn't worth defending, then maybe we've already lost more than we think. He looked down at Mia. She was crying silently, but her small hand reached toward his. He took it gently, pressing a kiss to her knuckles before returning to his seat. The judge sat still for a long time. The courtroom seemed frozen. Even the military guards had dropped their stern facade, their eyes soft with something unspoken. When Judge Myers finally spoke, her voice wavered. I have presided over hundreds of cases in my career. Cases of law, of logic, of order. But today, I find myself presiding over something entirely different. Conscience. She removed her glasses, setting them aside. The government has made its argument. The defense has made its plea. And yet, the simplest truth remains. There are things law cannot contain. Compassion, sacrifice, love. A single tear slid down her cheek as she continued. It is not my place to define life, but it is my duty to protect dignity. Therefore, I rule in favor of the Thompson family. The room erupted. Reporters gasped. Someone whispered, "She did it." The judge raised her hand, quieting the noise. Effective immediately, custody of Thor's remains and memory core shall be granted to David and Laura Thompson. The unit is to be reclassified, not as property, but as a fallen officer under the category of service and valor. David's breath caught in his chest. He closed his eyes, overwhelmed. Laura pressed her face into his shoulder, sobbing. Even Colonel Hale, stone-faced and rigid for so long, lowered his gaze. His lips moved silently, as if offering a wordless apology to the creature that had taught them all a lesson he'd never expected to learn. The judge's voice softened. Mr. Thompson, you said something earlier about love being enough reason to protect a life. She paused, her tone almost maternal. For what it's worth, I agree. The gavel came down, one sharp, final sound that echoed through history. Mia wheeled herself forward as the courtroom emptied. She reached the casket and placed her tiny pink jacket on top, the same one that had once saved him from the cold. "Good night, Thor," she whispered. "You can rest now." The collar light on the table beside the casket flickered once, faint but undeniable, before fading to black. Silence. Then, applause. Hesitant at first, then growing, until the entire room stood in honor of something the law could never define. Thor had lost his life, but in that moment, he became immortal. Not as a weapon, but as a symbol of everything still pure in the world. And as David held his daughter close, he realized the truth. Justice, at its best, isn't about power. It's about heart. Spring had finally come, the kind that breathes color into a world once gray. The park was alive again. Bees humming, children laughing, leaves whispering to the breeze. David sat beneath a maple tree, coffee in hand, sunlight soft on his face. Months had passed since the trial, since one story ended and another began. The world had moved on, but the name Thor remained. Murals, articles, the dog with a human heart. Across the grass, Mia chased a small black and tan puppy, her laughter bright. "Come on, Shadow," she called. Around his neck hung a scratched silver tag. Thor K937, the judge's gift, carrying not replacement, but remembrance. Laura appeared with a picnic basket. "You should join them," she said. "I'm too old for running." "You're too serious." Then softly, "You still think about him, don't you?" "Every day," David murmured. "I still expect to hear his paws on the stairs. Strange how silence can feel so human." Laura smiled gently. "Because he was, at least the best part of it." They sat quietly as a robin sang nearby. "People ask me what Thor really was," David said. "And what do you tell them? That love isn't something we create. It's something that finds us." Mia lay in the grass, shadow curled beside her, just like Thor once had. Sunlight caught the tag, and suddenly it blinked. Once, twice, then a slow, steady pulse. Laura gripped his hand. "David? It's probably just the sun," he whispered, though his voice trembled. "Daddy, look, it's shining." Mia laughed. "Thor's saying hi." David knelt beside her. "Maybe he is. Do you think he can see us?" "I think," he said, "he never stopped." The light faded, leaving only warmth beneath David's palm, the rhythm of one life carrying another. They stayed there, father, daughter, and a new beginning. The wind carried petals across the grass. "Daddy," Mia said softly, "Thor made me brave." "He made us all brave." As they headed home, the tag glimmered once more beneath the setting sun. Laura took his arm. "Do you think he's still out there?" David looked toward the golden sky. "If love leaves a mark," he said, "then he'll never be gone." Mia's laughter echoed behind them, and somewhere, in circuitry or something greater, a faint signal pulsed in time with her heart. A voice, distant but warm, whispered through the wind. "Love isn't about saving a life. It's about reminding the world what a heart is for." The sunlight flared, and for one perfect moment, everything felt whole again. Sometimes, stories like this remind us why dogs, especially German shepherds, hold such a sacred place in our lives. They're not just protectors or companions. They're living proof that loyalty and love can exist without words. A dog doesn't care about our mistakes or our past. They see who we are at our best, even when we forget. If you've ever looked into your dog's eyes and felt that quiet understanding, you already know what I mean. And if you'd like to explore ways to deepen that bond, there's a resource I've found helpful. Something that helps you understand your dog's heart a little better. I'll leave it here for you to check out when you feel ready. Because in the end, loving a dog isn't just about training or care. It's about connection. And sometimes, that connection can heal things inside us we didn't even know were broken. The dog with a human heart, forever remembered, forever loved.